good, sir.
Yeah.
Morning, Marvin.
Good. Hi, how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me to City Hall and for agreeing to this conversation. We're going to explore and understand your career and life in politics, and just understand a little bit more about what you're thinking about Bristol, about cities. I heard you talk in New York at the Bill Gates conference. And yeah,
was that just when we were in the crowd, when I was next to Yvonne?
No, you answered a question, session. Or no, you didn't answer a question. They invited you to speak.
Yeah, next to Yvonne from
Mayor
of Freetown.
Yes, yeah. And you spoke for a bit. And I've personally followed your career as someone in policy and politics for a while, so I feel really grateful and humbled for this opportunity. For those that aren't aware of you, maybe just a brief introduction about who you are and where you've come from.
Yeah, so Marvin Rees, Mayor of Bristol, and I was elected here in 2016, but it's the city I was born in, brought up. I describe it as experiencing the best of the worst of the place. Went away to university, came back, went off to the US, came back, and then ended up running for mayor.
How was that decision to run for mayor? Was it something that felt natural, or did you have to have lots of conversations and think about it deeply? Or
it felt natural and unnatural at the same time. You know, life is full of contradictions, right? So Bristol was the only city that voted yes to a mayor in a referendum. And so it was a surprise. It happened incredibly quickly, and it was a friend of mine, Marg Hickman, who's a councillor at the time. When the referendum came through, she said, "You should put yourself forward for it." And I tell young people now, it's one of the important things of having good friends who see things that you don't see. Because if she hadn't said that, I wouldn't have put myself forward. So
what would you be doing now?
I don't know. I might be living in the US. But the thing about that is, once I was in it, then it felt, okay, we're in it now. And it happened very quickly. You don't get much time to think about it. So the fit of it grows on you. It's not like, okay, there's my position. You know, I say it's like putting a suit coat on that's too big for you, and then one day you realise it fits.
Yeah.
You feel kind of natural in it, but it wasn't an automatic decision. It wasn't a life goal or anything like that came my way.
Yeah. And the issues that you've been speaking about across the world and in the US, where I saw you close and personal, compassionate cities and cities being almost the future of the world, because I think you kind of raised something that a UN report has said as well, that a large majority of the world will be living in cities. It's interesting to hear more of your thoughts about that and how that's been implemented here in Bristol. Well,
the world is urban now, right? 55% of the world live in cities now. It's going to be 2/3 by 2050 or so. So that's the vehicle we need to work with, right? It doesn't mean you don't work with any other vehicles, rural areas, but through cities you reach more people more quickly than through any other form of human organisation right now. So whether we're looking at improving global health and well-being and resilience, whether we're looking at making the ecological and carbon footprint of individuals lighter on the planet, right? Whether you're looking at making sure that people have adequate places to live, tackling political extremism, you know, you really need to go. You cannot do it without thinking, how do I work with these things called cities, and how do I work through those structures of cities? And I think one of the points I'm making is just because you talk about a nation doesn't mean you're automatically talking about its cities.
Yeah. What does that mean, if you don't mind?
Well, I mean, cities are distinct things within nations.
Okay, right? Yeah, sure, yeah.
And a national policy won't necessarily land well or be appropriate to a specific city context. It might actually be appropriate or relevant to anywhere, right? Because it's just a catch-all phrase, a catch-all policy that was written for a national perspective, but doesn't work when it hits the ground. So I think my position has been not to say that cities are more important than other forms of human organisation, but to say that they are there, most of the world live in them, and if you want to solve problems from climate change to extremism to poverty and hunger, you have to work through these forms of human organisation.
Yeah, and legislatively, what does that mean for Bristol? Do you think that means more devolved powers to you as a mayor, and or more ability to kind of change the direction of Bristolians and what happens?
Well, Bristol's gone for its own Mexit, right? So there was a referendum and Bristol's decided to end the mayoral system of leadership. I think it's a mistake, but you know, thought Brexit was a mistake too. People still vote for it, so what are you going to do? But I think what it does mean. This is the way I put it. It means policy support to support city leaders getting done what they want to get done, right? So that, and I think the word devolution is a good one, but I've started to describe it a bit differently, and it's about where should the weighting of leadership be at any particular point in time. So it's not that we say give cities these powers and then national government butt out, or you know, national government would have these city powers and cities should do what they're told. It's where's the weighting of leadership, and by extension, where's the weighting of followership? So on climate change, for example, Bristol's just done £1 billion deal, bringing in £1 billion over the next 20 years to decarbonise the energy system. Well, we've done that without any government support.
Wow.
But it would be fantastic to do it with our leadership at the city level, but with government coming in saying, this is incredible. How can we serve you in getting this done? Serve, I'm using that word on purpose, right? A loaded word. But how can we serve you? How can we work with you? How can we amplify the impact this deal you've done is having, and just follow that leadership? There are other occasions in which actually cities should be following the leadership of government and be a really good follower. One of those that I would suggest, again, which is a two-way, is on trade, right? I was over in New York not too long ago, and I met some representatives of the UK government, and they were working with their relationships with the US, but not really working with any regard to the existing relationships UK cities have with US cities. Right? There's a whole bunch of raw material there through city to city, sector, connectivity, creative sector.
Very strong relationships they can tap into.
Yeah. And actually, we can say, well, what are you trying to get done, national government, in your relationship with the US? Let's bring our black book of connectivity to what you're trying to get done and support you in that. By the way, the playback is government says, cities, how can we support you with your international relations so we can then make best use of that? But we don't have that kind of dynamic conversation in national leadership.
Interesting, in your conversation so far, words following leadership, meet people where they are. It's a very collaborative political ideology I'm sensing. It would be interesting just to understand where that came from. What kind of inspired this for you, and what was your background to say this is how I, Marvin, am going to approach policy and politics.
So I suppose there's a number of points. One is I think it's the way I am. I've always liked teams. I boxed as a kid, which is not a team sport. But then when I played rugby, I really liked being with, a team. And I believe, I think there's something really rich in recognising that we have, if we really want to serve the country, we have to find a way of being more than the sum of our parts, right? And again, these are catchphrases, but they're true. If we can find that sweet spot of connectivity and alignment, we can be more than the sum of our parts. I think too, I spent some time as a young kid. I wanted to be a Royal Marine officer, and probably overtell the story, but it was a real formative time for me, even though I didn't go in the end.
How old were you then of this, if you like?
I was about 17, 18.
Okay.
And because they had a liking for me, they would take me away on trips, and I went to Lake District, and they teach about leadership. And there's a pivotal story for me. We did a day walking around the Lake District hills with this exercise. We got back and we were doing a debrief that night. And this Royal Marines officer who was serving, who was a very successful Royal Marine officer, he said to us, you young guys, you think that being a Royal Marine officer is about carrying £100 packs up mountains. But it's partly that. But it's about finding the best map reader and giving them the map, the best shot, giving them the rifle, fittest person, giving them the heaviest backpack, and then getting by on 4 hours sleep so your guys can have 6. And
that's
I think,
deep.
Yeah, to me that's you create the conditions for people around you to flourish, right? And leadership is about getting people around you who are smarter than you and better than you, and asking them to be their best, even when it is better than you, and being comfortable with that. And then the last element is self-sacrifice, isn't it, right? Do 4 hours so they can have 6. And how do you give out? So how do you give out that context within which people can give of their best for the greater good, as it were? I'm no saint, right? None of us are, but I think that feeds into that sense of collaborative leadership, I think. And the last thing I would share is I had a really formative time when I worked in public health, in the mental health team, delivering race equality mental health. Health is a political outcome, you know. Mental health is a political outcome. It's not just a biomedical product. And when we work in public health, we talk about the wider determinants. Cannot tackle mental health just through the NHS. It's housing, employment, the starting life, parenting skills, parenting ability, what's happened in 2-3 generations before. So you cannot deliver outcomes for a place unless you think about all those wider determinants, some of which you have direct control and most of which you do not. And in fact, I'm going to quote Andy Marsh, who's currently head of the police college, our former police chief constable, who's an outstanding man. He said, world-class public sector leadership today is about what you influence, not what you control. Because you actually have very little control compared to the many factors that create outcomes or create the conditions within which people live. So you cannot have anything other than a collaborative, right, how do I work with this, how do I get the right people around the table approach.
Yeah, which you've done exemplary well here in Bristol, as I understand, with that $1 billion green deal that you've
tried. Yeah.
You know, finding levers, finding followers, and bringing them all together. I recognise time is against us, but if I could just go back a little bit to your relationship with the US. I do a lot of work with the US as well. Just interesting to understand where that came from, what that looks like, and what you found interesting about working with people across the pond.
Well, there's a natural connectivity to the US, right, within the UK. But as a young black kid growing up, there's a natural connection too, right? Many of my heroes came from the US. I mean, some of my earliest memories of watching Muhammad Ali carry the flag, watching the athletes win for us, right? Even if our own institutions wouldn't felt to represent us, as they often didn't. That's where we found it. And then I actually then have a lot of family connections. So my Jamaican family, most are in the United States. Okay. They're what you call Jamericans, right? So my uncles, my cousins are all over there. And I got there at 18, Camp America. I went to meet my family for the first time.
Oh, that must have been amazing.
Yeah, I met my grandfather for the first time, my Jamaican grandfather. Never met him before, William. And then I was always, I say that cultural connectivity anyway. But then in the late 90s, I went to work at Sojourners, a social justice organisation in DC. And then I went back again to work for a guy called Tony Campolo, who worked for Bill Clinton's advisor at the time. And I studied a second master's over there. Wow. So, my connections there were then strong. And then I went back again in 2010 for the Yale Ward Fellows Programme. So I was there at Yale University, which was a very special time as well. Living next door to Lumumba Diapain from Southern Sudan, Ricardo Turan from Nicaragua, and Alexei Navalny. Quite a hallway there. 4 of us lived together in the apartments.
Look at you all now.
In Bet's house, yeah.
Amazing.
Well, I'm not in prison. Alexei's fighting for his life, obviously.
Unfortunately, but just an eclectic mix of political figures there. The last area I really wanted to touch on with you as a personal one, as a black man in politics, doing very well, as someone who also wants to do well in politics. Just speak to your experiences so far, if you don't mind, the good and the bad, the challenges of, at least, this is also, I have to be careful in this discussion, but your political affiliation with the Labour Party, and your experiences so far. We'll maybe start there broadly, and then we'll narrow down wherever you feel most comfortable into recent experiences, perhaps.
That's a huge question. We could do the whole. So my experiences, one is there's a I do politics because I can't not do it, right? I asked Eric Garcetti, the former mayor of LA, once about what his political journey was going to be, and he was a really good guy, Eric. But he said, "Do it if you can't not," and that's what I found myself. I don't do it because I roll around aspiring to be elected, but growing up watching my mum experience what she experienced. White woman, brown baby, 1972, all this cafe come home, this ain't just some Ken Loach film. Do you know what I mean? Some of us
Real
live
life.
the
Yeah,
echoes
yeah,
of the Ken
yeah.
Loach. That I was. It's just it burns inside me. What can I say, right? And I was talking to my son a few months ago because he didn't want me to be in politics. He was saying, "Well, why would you do it?" And I said that you do it because sometimes when you live, you don't live just because you don't just live for convenience, right? You have to do something.
Do something that matters.
Yeah, and do something that matters. Do something of significance. So, and that has I've had the honour of having that opportunity. You know, not least just being elected, first mayor of Black African heritage in Europe. When I was in the United States and they shared that, the black mayors were blown away. What the heck has been happening in Europe?
Yeah.
Right? And then, dare I say, you know, to be a mayor that has, with my team, has got a good record. We've occupied positions of national and international leadership, not because we've gone out and sought them out. We haven't. I just don't do that. It's not the way I am. But people have come and said, "Would you lead? Would you speak here? Would you be on this panel?" And I hope, you know, I've done our people proud, as it were, in that sense. You know, I said some years ago, my framework for Obama's success is not the one that some people saying, "Why hasn't he done more radical stuff?" I said, listen, he's a black man, the president. What do you expect him to do? I said, the first thing he needs to do is win. Just stop bad people getting in power. That's all you need.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just hold the tide back.
And
right?
that's enough. That takes enough.
Second, please get re-elected. I don't need radical stuff. But when you're the first, don't lose. So that our only black president isn't like, oh, well, he was just a one-term. I go, please win. Fantastic. Chalk number 2. Third is, you know, don't embarrass us. You know, keep it together so that that door that is now opened on a world that can say, actually, a leader can look like that. They can be a shaved-headed, 6-foot black man who can go into a business meeting, who can do the diplomatic, who can give a speech. Yeah, I didn't see that before, but now I can see it subconsciously often, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I've had that opportunity. Beyond that, politics, even the people on my own side, is not clean of racism, though. And I don't mean you're kind of, you know, knuckle dragging, swastika waving racist, right? It's the subtle stuff. And Martin Luther King made this point in a letter from Birmingham jail. He said, our greatest opponent is not the Klan or the white citizens councillor, but the moderate. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is much more infuriating from opposition of people of ill will. Right? And I think when you get into politics, particularly on the progressive side of politics where I am, you bump into that. And I would describe, you could probe it more, but I myself and my deputy mayor Asher described the process of being Karened quite a lot, you know.
And is that what you felt in recent times?
Oh, since the beginning. Yeah, since the beginning. So we'll get quite head-on, collision-oriented attacks, both from opposition parties and from, I would say, activists on the left too. Within
what you would assume is your own camp.
And when you push back, you know, it's like, oh, you know, you're aggressive, you're this, that. You say, no, I'm just looking you in the eye. But that's then seen as, you know, aggressive. And there's a point of self-reflection, I think, within politics that needs to be had around that. It came out around Coastal Statue time. It came out before and after, you know, as well. And these are unfortunate. So we do need. I mean, I faced it with in the field of journalism as well. You know, that you get elected. You get elected, and it's like now you're just a politician. All your history don't matter. You are a member of the political elite. And I'm saying, hold on. The person interviewing me is a privately educated Oxbridge graduate with parents with a phenomenal pension pot, with a cottage in the home counties, and I'm the elite.
You just got elected.
I'm just elected.
Yeah.
And one day I won't be elected.
Yeah.
And I could use a start phrase here, and then I'll just be another, right? And so I find that tendency to abstract me as a black politician, out of the wider realities of race and class, is a challenge. I find that challenging, and a lack of self-awareness on the other part.
We have another challenge in the next 2 minutes that we have. What's next for Marvin? Particularly, I don't know if you want to touch upon, the ambitions that you had for Bristol North East and any reflections on that. But
well, I said I'd throw my hat in the ring for Bristol North East. I did it, I felt, because I could not, but the local members decided I wasn't the best person for them. That's their decision. That's what are you going to do? So I will look now, and I guess it's a case of me talking to some of the organisations working on the future of cities, talking about how I can support Keir and the Labour Party in other ways going into the next general election, because we do desperately need a change of government, and obviously we've been doing a lot of work on climate change and migration, particularly through the lens of cities, and I'm incredibly keen to continue to support that work in the future.
Well, if your past achievements and trajectory so far seem to go by, there's a lot more to look forward to for Marvin. Marvin, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it, and it's been such an empowering conversation for me, and I hope for many other people, many different kinds.
No problem, all good.
Thank you.